of fighting in Lebanon, which puts the United States at crossroads with Israel, and the promise of no future strikes. And as you noted, the president saying that that could resume in a matter of days means that we're at a point now where it's not clear how both sides reach a point where there's an enduring cessation of hostilities, where both sides can feel that they have gained something, largely because Iran is entering these talks feeling that they have the upper hand.
Director Brennan, is there any way strategically, I like the way Nancy sort of separated out military accomplishments on our side that led to military damage inside Iran from strategic objectives. And one of the, I think, ways that Trump has proven to be a political Houdini is that he says 37 things, and then in the end, everyone's so confused. But it was never communicated to anyone, by anyone that said anything publicly, that the single objective was to do some damage to Iran's Navy. I mean, that wasn't anyone's reason. Donald Trump told people that help is on the way. That was speaking to protesters. Regime change is something that they've all talked about. The nuclear program is something that they've all talked about. Iran now has complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. It maintains its nuclear enrichment program. It's got tons of sanctions relief that I'm sure will quickly fund the rebuilding of the military program. I mean, is there any analysis strategically that we haven't exited weaker than we entered?
No, I think everybody's confused because Donald Trump himself is confused, and it just shows the real ill-advised decision that he made as far as this war is concerned. Neither side at this point has a winning hand. Iran, though, I think has a spoiler hand at this point because now they have played a card that they didn't play before this conflict started, which is the Strait of Hormuz. And I think it's going to be up to now both sides in a classic negotiation to determine what exactly are they minimally willing to accept from the other side, and what are they minimally willing to give to the other side. So for the United States, I think there is a real interest, despite Trump's rhetoric and bluster about military capabilities. I think we want this ceasefire to continue. We also want the Strait of Hormuz to be opened. We want some type of action as far as the nuclear enrichment program is concerned. Whether or not there's going to be some type of Iranian agreement to suspend nuclear enrichment for some period of time, whether they're going to allow there to be some securing of the highly enriched uranium, the one that's already at 60%. And also, I think the United States is going to want to have some type of assurance that some of these other issues that are left sort of unaddressed or unresolved are going to be able to be negotiated or discussed later on. The Iranians certainly, I think, want this ceasefire to continue, and they wanted some guarantee that it's not just going to be temporary. And that's where Lebanon comes into this equation. And unfortunately, Netanyahu has his own agenda. And so the real question is whether or not the United States and Trump is willing to tell Netanyahu what not to do. And that means ceasing this wanton bombing and this almost indiscriminate killing that's going on in Lebanon. But also, I think the Iranians are going to want some type of compensation for opening up the Strait of Hormuz. Mm-hmm. Now, we shouldn't allow the Iranians to be able to, have some type of toll system in international waters. That would be very bad precedent. But there could be some type of creative way to say, okay, there's going to be some sanctions relief as well as unfreezing of some assets as a way to compensate Iran for some of the destruction that's taken place, allow them to rebuild, not calling it a toll system, but the Iranians are going to need money, need some resources. So I can see that, again, both sides are going to have to figure out exactly whether or not, again, minimum requirements on both sides are going to be able to be met that will give enough to each side to declare that they won, even though we know that both sides, in fact, at this point, I think are losers.
It's just amazing that we are one way or another going to rebuild Iran at a time when Trump is saying at fundraisers there's no money for Medicare or childcare or any domestic spending. I want to show you something, Director Brennan, that Sue Gordon said on this program on Wednesday.
Those allies and partners the ones who have already started rewiring and making contingency plans. And if you want two really good signals here, for Italy's president to deny us, when a minute ago she was kind of a bestie, and for Japan's prime minister, who are always very diplomatic and very careful in their criticism, to make the comment she has, the world has figured out that we are not who we were and they must make other plans. And while everyone will deal with us because we're rich and powerful and we have resources, it will be a transactional relationship that does not give us the strength that we have benefited from and from which the world has benefited, at least for the past 70 some years.
How do you assess the damage to America's standing in the world?
Profound and long-lasting. I just returned from Ireland last night. I was caught behind those protests in terms of fuel. And I must tell you, every person I spoke to in Ireland were just disgusted with what's going on right now in terms of what the United States is doing in the decision to go to war. And they, refer to Trump as a madman, a lunatic, or whatever. And they see just how needless and senseless this was. And so, again, our reputation, I think, across the board is in tatters now as a result of what Donald Trump is doing, which is just using our military capabilities in such a reckless way. And they really do blame the United States for all of the challenges that they're facing on the economic, political, strategic front. So again, they say, what has happened to America? They see America in a much different light than they had for the past, since World War II, that the United States was the defender of human rights and freedoms and international peace and security. Now they see that we are, in fact, the instigator of a lot of this instability, as well as the impact on the global economy and how detrimental it is to people around the globe.
Margaret, I guess I have a version of the same question for you about the lasting damage of the world seeing an American president willing to post on social media that he would use the military to, quote, destroy a civilization.
So, Nicole, this man should not be in charge of the United States military. What he has been posting on social media are the words of somebody who is suffering from a mental illness. If anybody that you knew posted those crazy things online, you would probably do a welfare check on them to make sure they were okay. And yet this man is the commander-in-chief of our military. There's some irony here that the threshold that we had for starting the war was ostensibly to prevent widespread mass civilian casualties, and yet President Trump's sort of last gasp attempt to negotiate, I suppose, is threatening widespread civilian casualties on a massive scale. So this is somebody who really should not be in charge of commanding troops. I really didn't appreciate the comments that the troops will just sort of hang out until we decide what we're going to do. It kind of seems like maybe we should be using diplomacy and negotiating, and maybe 13 service members didn't have to die if we're in the exact same spot that we were in before the conflict, except with less leverage, as your other two guests just explained. So it strikes me as a really unfortunate position. And I get a lot of questions. I know you and I have talked about this, about, do troops follow unlawful orders? When he says things like that, how far down the chain of command does that decision have to get made? I have to say, that is not something we should put troops in a position to decide. That is on Congress. That is Congress's job to remove an ineffective official within the executive branch if he is endangering our military or asking people to do unlawful things or acting in ways that indicate that he's no longer competent enough to hold the position. And that goes for Hegseth or President Trump. So, this is extremely damaging to the military. And I think, of course, as the other guests just outlined, to our alliances as well.
What do you think it is? Is it inertia that keeps people like Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance in the room? Because you're right, someone in the world of sports that's posting on social media or entertainment that's posting on social media in this manner, there would be a totally different tone and tenor to the press coverage, right? It would be
Yes.
about conservatorships. It would be
Concern.
about drug addiction. It would be like people would, if social media activity were in the same vein for a star athlete or a superstar in any sort of entertainment sphere, the conversation would be totally different. And in some ways, he maybe benefits from the complete power of the office of the presidency. But what is it in your view or in your experience that explains the silence of the men and women who see it as you and I do? I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying things about Donald Trump more vitriolic than any Democrat I've seen.
Yeah, I wish I had the answer to that. I have no idea. I just know that it really should not be up to the troops to try to, parse out what's a lawful order and what's a lawful one and an unlawful one. That should be on Congress. That the framers designed the Constitution to give the legislators, the lawmakers, the power to fix that. And so whether it's just sort of a thought that the people around him can just keep the lid on things while he sort of spouts off these absolutely crazy things, which, by the way, as my co-author and I argued in an article earlier this week, just the threats alone constitute a war crime, the acts and the threats. That's something that we agreed to in the post-World War II rules-based order, that you don't use civilians as pawns to threaten or to act against. So I'm not really sure what it is if everybody thinks that they can keep the lid on this thing, but I completely agree that any other person, there would be serious concern for that person's mental welfare, and yet we are allowing him to continue to be the commander-in-chief.
Nancy, what sort of latitude does J.D. Vance have as a negotiator? Is he, phoning home to Trump, or does he actually have authorities here?
I don't think that's really clear. I imagine that he is going in, given the president's signal, doing everything he can to try to strike a deal such that the U.S. military doesn't want to be engaged anymore. The fact that he's going into this as a known opponent of the strike, I think, also plays a role in how he will be seen by negotiators. And so we will see over the course of the days. I also think we shouldn't think of these negotiations as just over the span of one day. This could be weeks and weeks of negotiations. These are complex deals that need to be reached out, very, very specific issues. And even then, it's not clear to me how enduring that kind of agreement will be. Will it hold up for the next month, the next year? I wanted to add really quickly about the tweet, because I think it's worth noting that that tweet, in addition to all the comments that were raised earlier, really played into the Iranian regime's hands. The Iranian regime could say to the people, do you see this? This war is not about liberating you. This is about an attack on us. And it gave them leverage to say that we are here to defend us, the United States. This is not a call for you to go to the streets. This is not to liberate you. This is to attack all of us. And I think that's an important point to note as we talk about the impact of that social media post.
Right. Trump made clear that his target was not just the regime, not just the current population, but his aim was to, quote, destroy their civilization. Incredible week. Nancy Youssef, thank you for joining us to try to make some sense of it. Director Brennan and Margaret, stick around. Still ahead for us, why Melania Trump's surprise reigniting of the flame that is the Jeffrey Epstein scandal happened. There's still more questions than answers, but we'll go through all of them. We'll talk about why that surprise event yesterday is being met with anger on the part of some of the survivors. Also ahead for us, we'll look ahead to the shattered coalition that once was the mighty MAGA movement. Later in the broadcast, Trump looks like he's got nowhere else to go, openly fighting with those most loyal supporters. Is ceasefire teetering and the economy cratering? What does an autocrat do when that's the case? Some of those plans for tightening his grip on power are already in place. Expect him to kick into high gear. We'll explain what that looks like. We'll get to all that and more. And Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. I want to bring bring into our conversation and coverage former Assistant and Special Agent in Charge at the FBI and National Security and Intelligence Analyst for all of us, Michael Feinberg. Director Brennan and Margaret are still with me. Director Brennan, I want to follow up with you on something Margaret said in that last block about what the world saw in terms of what Trump's own MAGA coalition members have described as, quote, Trump going insane. That was Marjorie Taylor Greene. Other members said worse. Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones. Again, people who have been not just supporters and backers and cheerleaders, but sycophantic adherents to MAGA and everything it has ushered into our politics, or describing him as unwell. What does that do in the eyes of our allies and adversaries?
Well, I think it raises their concerns and their deep worries that if, in fact, somebody who is not well mentally, is unstable, and basically is the equivalent of a madman or a lunatic, and as Margaret said, someone who is the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military and all of those capabilities, it's very, very worrisome. And it's clear that Donald Trump is getting increasingly unhinged, and the things that he's doing now is leading to these divisions within his base. And to paraphrase, William Shakespeare in Hamlet, is something is increasingly rotten in the Trump administration and in the MAGA base. We know that it's been always deeply corrupt, and it is ironic that this war that was initiated by Trump was hoping that there was going to be fissures within the Iranian regime as a result of this. Ironically, it is the exact opposite. It is fissures right now in, increasing fratricide within this MAGA sphere and within the Trump administration. And I think his continued use and increasing use of profanities, I think, is just a reflection of his deep angst and worry himself. He doesn't know how to get out of this mess. And whether you're talking about the Epstein mess, whether you're talking about Melania goes out and gives this press conference reportedly without him knowing in advance, and the Iran war and all of its ramifications and implications, this is a real mess of his creation. And that's why I think we're seeing these reckless tweets, going after people, and the use of these profanities. Again, talking to people that I just came back from a trip, they really are very concerned that here is the commander-in-chief and the chief executive of the United States that is a raving madman. And what does this mean as far as global peace and security? It is deeply, deeply troubling.
Yeah, Michael Feinberg, a lot of these conversations, including the ones I have here, are around the political implications of that. But it's abundantly clear that the old expression, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold, means that the world is watching Trump's own prominent TV regular allies question his stability, his sanity, his competence, and his motives for starting a war with Iran. I wonder, and the men and women of the military are seeing it as well. I wonder how you assess our vulnerability in this moment.
I think it's higher than at any other moment, certainly that I was in government. Just to sort of carry on with Director Brennan's Hamlet theme, Trump is very much of the mind that his thoughts be bloody or nothing worth. His rhetoric has become unhinged to a degree that we never saw during his first administration or even during the first few months of this administration. And what that's resulting in is not just only the antagonistic attitude towards people who want to attack us, heightening sensitivities and heightening threats at the very time we should be trying to de-escalate them, but it's also giving our allies pause. As the other guests know, the United States intelligence community is incredibly reliant upon reporting from its allies, particularly the Five Eyes nations. And when they see the leader of the United States act like somebody who has come completely mentally unhinged, it creates an immense amount of reluctance on their part to share the most sensitive intelligence because they have no idea what's going to be done with it. If I'm Great Britain or Australia, and I have information on something going on in Iran, or I have information that could help the United States target something that might be a legitimate military target, I might still pause if the president is actually threatening something that might be nuclear war.
Margaret, there are 3 stories this week. I've been covering Donald Trump for 10 years. They'll study my brain when I'm dead. But there are 3 stories since Sunday that I've had to check. We've all been sort of trained to look out for deep fakes. I had to check. One was the open the fucking Straits of Hormuz tweet on Easter Sunday from Donald Trump, who plays a character that cares about the faith community and faith leaders. Posted that on Easter Sunday. I had to check when I first saw Melania Trump denying things that I'd never heard alleged about her when it came to the Epstein crimes and the Epstein investigation. And I checked the story that came out today about an arch that Trump was about. I mean, it feels like he's jumped ahead over satire and is doing things that are so weird. And I just wonder if you think this moment is one that America can recover from.
Well, we're like in a post-reality world, right? Like you have to constantly check and make sure that what you're seeing is real. And you have to couple that with sort of the president's apologists who say, well, this is just rhetoric. This is just a negotiating tactic, who also can't reconcile that position with this FAFO culture, or that he means what he says and you'll find out. And so I do want to build off of something Mike said that I think sort of answers your question, or doesn't answer your question, unfortunately, to a little bit. Other countries don't know what we're doing. They can't trust the commander-in-chief. You're not alone in, checking to see what's real and what's not, and whether or not this is a deep fake. But that becomes really dangerous in an international dynamic where other countries are worried about something like collective self-defense. For example, we invaded Iran based on ostensibly intelligence that they had weapons that could cause mass civilian casualties. They didn't outright threaten the United States. We have weapons that can cause mass civilian casualties, and we have outright threatened another civilization. And so maybe people in America have normalized this and have known, like, well, let's just give it a few hours to see if somebody's going to explain that was just him saying something crazy after dark when he got on his social media. I don't think that we should be able to count on, and I don't think we should ask the rest of the world to take that approach. And you may find yourself in a scenario, we may find ourselves in a scenario where other countries act in preemptive self-defense against us. That is actually one of the reasons why threatening civilians is considered prohibited under international law. It's not just the acts, it's the threat, because the threat itself can cause other people to act in reaction to that. And again, if you compare the threshold that we had for attacking Iran versus what the president has done, you just hope that there's a lot of diplomacy going on behind the scenes to assure Russia, to assure China, to assure any other country that may be thinking, maybe I should intervene because the U.S. is about to do something really crazy. But we have a completely gutted State Department, and we have Marco Rubio doing like 15 different jobs. So it's kind of hard to assume that sort of backroom diplomacy is going on to, I guess, sort of explain away the craziness that is playing out on a world stage. So I don't know that I have a great answer for you other than, we're in a post-reality world, and I don't think we should expect the rest of the world to live in it with us. But good news, the Constitution provides a way to fix that. We can remove somebody who is no longer competent from being in that job.
It's an amazing moment. It's so great to have all 3 of you to talk to you about it. Director John Brennan, Margaret Donovan, thank you for starting us off. Michael sticks around when we come back. Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse are accusing Melania Trump of shifting the burden onto the victims, saying they have done their part. And it's time now to hear from others. We'll get to that reporting next.
Bondi, we should be talking about what is Todd Blanche going to do. I think we really are just completely caught off guard and trying to figure out, what our next move is.
she called lies about her having close ties with convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. It's not clear to anyone what lies or what reports Melania was referring to in a press conference. It still seems to have come out of nowhere in terms of what's publicly known, and that her husband claims was some elements of it were a surprise for him too. But regardless of the reason behind it, Danny Bensky and other survivors are warning today against anything that shifts the burden onto them. More than a dozen survivors put out a statement shortly after Melania Trump spoke. Quote, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein have already shown extraordinary courage by coming forward, filing reports, and giving testimony. Asking more of them now is a deflection of responsibility, not justice. Survivors have done their part. Now it's time for those in power to do theirs. Joining me at the table, host of Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Michael's still here. Their statements are in the Epstein files, and Donald Trump has made sure that they don't all get released in any manner that is speedy or fully transparent or respectful of their personal information or addresses. I mean, the survivors isn't the opaque part of this, and Melania Trump must read enough news to know that. It's the
And I realize how inadequate to the occasion the adjective messy is. But in terms of just this sort of weird quagmire possession, Pam Bondi seemingly misspoke or dissembled when she said she had a list of clients that she then claimed she didn't have. They dilly-dallied on turning over all the documentation. When they turned over certain documents.
By saying the victims ought to come and answer questions when the victims have
politics of this. Todd Blanche this week with Jesse Waters over on Fox News said this is this is ancient history. We're moving on.
well, obviously, the memo didn't get to I don't know if she's on the East Wing since there's a ballroom now. Wherever she is, that memo didn't get to her because she revived the story and it raised more questions than answers at the end of her statement.
It's crazy. Michael Feinberg, thank you so much for being part of our coverage today. Rev, when we come back, we're going to ask you about what you've been doing all week long. You've had the big conference. Everybody who is anybody and wants to be anybody more than they are right now has been there. You have been their host. You got an early look at who could help lead the country out of this moment. We'll talk about that next. How do you think about your last year serving and what you want to accomplish over this next year? Do you trust the FBI to handle the oversight of this investigation? That is what media does. They hold power to account.
Do you think that America is awake and alert?
Democrats seem to be finding their footing. People are really down on this president about the economy.
No ethics violations are being prosecuted.
The Weekend Prime Time, Saturdays and Sundays at 6 on MS Now.
I think that, look, the American people have a right to expect that anyone who wants to run for office and be a leader, that it can't be about themselves. And what they want for themselves has got to be about the American people. And that's how I think of it. And I am thinking about it in the context of then, is who and where and how can the best job be done for the American people. That's how I'm thinking about it. I'll keep you posted.
That's former Vice President Kamala Harris answering the Rev's question, $64 million question. Is she running? She was speaking today at the National Action Network's 35th annual convention. We're back with Rev. What did you sort of pick up from her?
I think that she was clear. I think in her heart of hearts, she's wrestling with it.
She made that clear, right?
Yeah, and she certainly didn't dismiss it, but she didn't affirm she would do it. The crowd, we had over 2,000 people in the
It's a great crowd.
And they were cheering her on.
For sure.
And I think that she's weighing it. She's, I think, prudent enough not to make a judgment based on just a crowd or two. But she did, people need to remember, she got more votes than any presidential candidate in history other than Donald Trump. She got more votes than Biden or Obama did. And so it's hard to not think about it if you're her and with people urging her on. So I think she's going to be very deliberate in her decision.
Everybody has been there this week. Just take me through the highlights and lowlights.
Well, we started with Governor Shapiro, who was very well received. We had Wes from Maryland, Wes Moore, yeah. And Wes Moore was very well received. He's very good. We are going to have we also had Ruben Gergel, who really surprised me and how
he's a big campaigner. He's on the trail a lot.
He was excellent. And tomorrow we'll have Senator Cory Booker. We'll have, and I think I'm interested in this, Senator Kelly. Mike Kelly's coming. And I think that it's going to be very interesting to see. We've had them all. It's hard to even remember. And we finish tomorrow. And I think that the fact that they don't fear standing up not only to Trump, but on issues that Trump has tried to demonize, voting, the whole issue of DEI, every one of them have answered it. And I think that indicates that if one of them ends up being the nominee, they will not shy away from taking it on. I don't see any of them trying to appease Trumpsters by saying, I'm giving up some of the base. And by coming to our conference in and of itself is a statement that I'm going to be inclusive. Whether they agree with National Action Network or me on everything or not, I'm going to have a big tent. And I think that's important.
Most important and smartest voters in the coalition. Who did your members like the most?
Well, Kamala Harris, I would think did extremely well. Yeah. I think Wes Moore, of course, did well. Yeah. But they didn't dislike anyone.
Yeah.
I've had people, we've been doing this for years now, every cycle since 2000. And I've had some that you could hear people, and some, maybe even boo. Nobody got booed and nobody got the kind of thing. So I think so far, we'll see what happens tomorrow.
All right. It's great. It's a really important event, and I love the sneak peek into the contest ahead of us. When we come back, the Artemis crew has completed its mission to the moon and is right now preparing for re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. We'll tell you what to expect next. We are keeping an eye on the skies above right now because in approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes, the Artemis 2 crew will splash down in the Pacific after their 10-day mission, traveling farther into deep space than anyone else has ever gone before. And they've sent back views of the moon's surface no human eyes have ever seen before. Their mission is the first crewed mission into deep space in more than 50 years, and the 4 astronauts have captured the attention of the entire planet. But now their return home isn't set to be easy. Here's NASA's rendering of what it'll look like. Their spacecraft, Orion, will hit the atmosphere at nearly 25,000 miles an hour, generating extreme heat and a 6-minute communications blackout. The shield protecting the crew from the heat is flawed, according to NASA. This leaves the crew, as one former astronaut told the New York Times, with a 1 in 20 chance of a disastrous splashdown. We'll be covering that live here on MS Now, so be sure to stick around with us all evening long. After the break, Donald Trump's losses are piling up. So what happens when an autocrat is backed into a corner? We'll try to answer that question when the next hour starts after a short break. Bruce Springsteen taking it upon himself to refill and refuel the soul of our nation. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock now in New York. From a bang to a whimper, a week that started with Donald Trump's throwaway threats of mass murder and complete annihilation and a deliberate weakening of our global alliances is ending now the only way that it seems it could. With Donald Trump somehow putting America in a weaker position today, and Donald Trump being in a weaker position today, tactically, politically, and morally than he was on Monday. In normal times, in a healthy, functioning democracy, that would be, politically speaking, curtains, right? Lights out. Any politician in a democracy, having failed so spectacularly, having been suddenly abandoned by huge and very high-profile members of their own political coalition, a person in a democracy might recognize the inherent weakness of his or her position and retreat or recalibrate or improve. Or not, but it would come down to the same thing, a limping along to the sunset of one's political power or political lifespan. But as we've been telling you for a long time, right? These are not normal times, and our democracy isn't completely healthy. And Donald Trump isn't that sort of leader anyway. He has proven through word and through deed that he's instead an aspiring autocrat. And when an autocrat fails and is humiliated and is exposed as weak, he doesn't correct, right? He doesn't let go. He doesn't abandon the calamity. Instead, he tightens the grip. Remember the last time Donald Trump lost his grip? He incited an armed insurrection. He had an armed mob of his supporters march on our very seat of government. And we didn't know it at the time, but that was really just the beginning. What followed that was years now of undermining faith that his supporters and many Americans feel in our institutions and our very system of government, in democracy itself. And he did all that without any of it being true. To some extent, tragically, some of those efforts were successful. The question now is this: what's Donald Trump going to do this time? Well, lucky for us, he's telling us and showing us. The answer is right in front of us. He's going to cheat in the midterm elections. The scaffolding of that plan is already in full view. Last week, Trump tried to disenfranchise voters through perhaps illegal modifications to rules on mail-in ballots. His administration has refused to rule out sending ICE agents to polling places. He's pushed for federal control over our elections. And he has reportedly been presented with a draft executive order alleging Chinese interference as a predicate or a basis to be able to do so. In the same way athletes are taught to throw to where their target is going to be, not where they are, it is on us to examine where all of this is heading, where this is going to be in November. An aspiring autocrat, humiliated, diminished, but ready, willing, and perhaps still able to seize the reins of